The Joe Mays J-Raff Show is brought to you in part by Mays Sandwich Shop, serving delicious hometown favorites to the West Lawn community since 1947. You are listening to the Joe Mays J-Raff Show, bringing you the latest news and commentary on baseball.
The 0-2 pitch, swing and a miss, struck him out! The Philadelphia Phillies are 2008 World Champions of Baseball!
Hockey.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Flyers are going to win the Stanley Cup! The Flyers win the Stanley Cup!
College football.
But now Blackledge is going to put it up on first down. He's going for the bundle. Garrity! Touchdown!
And the NFL.
The Denver Broncos are world champions. They have just won Super Bowl 50.
Now, here are your hosts, Joe Mays and Justin Raffoff.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 212th episode of the Joe Mays J-Raff Show. I am your host again this evening, Joe Mays, with no one in particular tonight. Unfortunately, J-Raff was unable to make it this evening, and I was unable to find a replacement as it was pretty late in the game. So hopefully everything works out in the traffic situation for J-Raff, and we'll be able to pick up again in about a month with him. We do have other JMN/JR radio stuff happening. Unfortunately, it won't be the Joe Mays J-Raff Show over the next few weeks. We've got to work on the Bulldog Hour. So we will be working in the studio and producing some content, but it won't be the Joe Mays J-Raff Show. So this evening you're stuck with me for episode 212. And while there's a lot to talk about in the sports world, we have what was supposed to be the first day of actual football with the Hall of Fame game, not to be because of the field. We also have the Olympics going on and a baseball legend, although one that is obviously controversial, and Alex Rodriguez has announced his retirement effective on Friday. Will be his last game for the Yankees and in Major League Baseball. We are continuing, or I am continuing, our look at the 2016 NFL season. Tonight, episode 212 of the Joe Mays J-Raff Show focuses on the North Division. So we'll be talking NFC North, AFC North. We'll tackle some of the long-standing and historically great programs that pro football has produced. Teams like the Packers, the Bears, the Vikings, the Lions, and in the AFC, the Steelers, the Bengals, the Browns, and the Ravens. So where do I think all of them are going to fare, or how all of them are going to fare in 2016? Well, we'll get to that in a second, but first, I'll hand out the contact information. And the best way to contact us is through email, as usual, and you can do that using the Mays Sandwich Shop email inbox, and that is joemaysandjraff@gmail.com. Again, joemaysandjraff@gmail.com. Or we do have a hotline. You can call us on the Mays Sandwich Shop hotline at 530-563-6297. Again, 530-563-6297. We're also all over social media, Facebook and Twitter primarily. You can find us at facebook.com/JoeMaysandJraff or on Twitter at JoeMaysandJraff. And actually, we do have an email to discuss tonight, and this one comes from longtime listener and my Uncle Rich in New England. And he says, following last week's show, "It was good to see you back for your show. I'm keeping track of your picks and give my version after yours are done. What kind of medicine were you on when you picked Oakland to win the West Division and Denver third? I need all of your input for my fantasy drafts coming up, and as you know, it is my turn to win again this year. Again, welcome back, and ain't it fun talking football once again?" Well, see, there's a sentiment that I can get behind with Uncle Rich, and yes, it is great to talk football once again. And we do have fantasy coming up in 2 weeks. We have our draft, but I'm not going to help him because no way do I want to see him win again. He's already won 3 times, and he's rotated that every other year. And he did not win last year, unfortunately. It was my dad and my cousin Todd. But he is due to win this season. Hopefully we can put an end to that. Hopefully I can put an end to that, because I would love to get another championship. I won 2 of the first 3 years and haven't won since. Although I made, I think, 3 more finals, just couldn't come out on top. So yes, fantasy football kicking into high gear shortly, and especially for our league that we've been doing for over a decade now in the next 2 weeks. So thanks for the email, Rich. And let's move on to the main point of the episode, and that is the 2016 NFL preview, focusing on the North divisions. And very, very, like I said at the beginning, historically some strong teams, very well known, a lot of notoriety surrounding these teams, especially when you're talking Steelers, Packers, Bears, and Vikings over the years. Lions have struggled. Browns, Bengals haven't done much. Ravens technically relatively new when you're talking about the rest of these teams. Ravens do have 2 Super Bowls, so obviously they're one of the better teams over the last 15 years or so. So a lot of history there. But how are they gonna fall into place in those 2 divisions in 2016? At least according to me. Since I'm flying solo again here tonight, this is just my opinion, and we'll throw it out there, and we'll talk about last year's teams. Now, the Vikings, they won the NFC North last year, with the Packers coming in second, followed by the Lions and the Bears. I think that was pretty similar to what at least I had said on the show for 2015. I saw the Vikings being good, Packers still right there, with the Lions and Bears, coming up behind. Is much going to change in 2016? Personally, I don't see it. Maybe a little bit of a flip-flop here or there, but I think pretty similar to the way that 2015 concluded. We'll start at the bottom like we always do. So NFC North 2016. Last year it was the Bears at 6-10. I think it's going to be the Lions this year. I don't want to overestimate what kind of loss Calvin Johnson is going to be, but at times he was their main component on offense. They have Matthew Stafford, sure, but without Johnson, I think he's going to struggle, and I think it's going to be time for probably a new regime in Detroit, and possibly even looking ahead to moving on from Matthew Stafford. I don't know what the contract situation is there, but a new coach comes in, and there's a chance he's not going to want to hang around with a guy who's been in Detroit and hasn't won that much, at least when it matters. They added some wide receivers to try to offset the loss of Calvin Johnson in Marvin Jones, Jeremy Curley, Andre Caldwell. They also brought in a ton of defenders to try to, stop the bleeding there. They're still looking to upgrade the offensive line. They tried another offensive lineman going Taylor Decker in the first round of the draft. But I don't see Detroit being that strong. And unfortunately, with a former Penn Stater at the helm of the Lions, I would love to see them doing good, but I don't know. I've never really been a big Matthew Stafford fan. I know I probably underestimate his abilities, but I just don't know that I see them having enough in the trenches or out wide on offense. They've always had a running back by committee. They never seem to be able to do too much. Maybe Amir Abdul will step up. The Nebraska player entering his second year. I'm not sure. He's a great kick returner. He's got some fumbling issues and some health issues, but I don't know. Jim Caldwell, unfortunately, hasn't done as much as I had hoped in the NFL, at least as a head coach. And I just don't see the Lions being that strong in 2016. 7-9 last year. I think they're going to take a step back and probably 5-11 and put them in 4th place in the NFC North. So I have them flip-flopping with the Bears. I do think the Bears are going to be a little bit better. I mean, nothing jumps out, and obviously we heard the Bennett brothers really bash Jay Cutler this week, saying he couldn't hit anything, even if anyone was wide open. That mostly coming from Martellus Bennett, who's now in New England as the tight end there opposite Rob Gronkowski. So the Bears, 6-10 last year. They were 4th place. I have them finishing in 3rd. Probably about 6-10, maybe 7-9. They lost Bennett. They also lost Matt Forte. He was their do-everything guy. They had some good receivers, especially Alshon Jeffrey when he's healthy. I think he missed close to half of the year last year, 6 or 7 games, I believe. He's already starting banged up a little bit this year. He can be electric. He's not, a speed guy, but he's an incredible possession guy. At one time, he was considered possibly the best player in college at South Carolina, and then some habits draft nicks and teams got wind of, and he fell, but he's proved to be an incredible player in the NFL. Even after Brandon Marshall left, he's done a great job when healthy, but that's a big problem that he's been having. Now, they did add some offensive linemen, which they desperately needed, Bobby Massey, Patrick Omama, and Ted Larson. Unfortunately for them, they lost what was supposed to be their starting center, Ronis Grasu, out of Oregon. He was entering, I believe, his second year with the team, and he tore his ACL yesterday or today. So already some injury issues for the Bears. That could come back to bite them. Why do I pick the Bears over the Lions? Just by a game or two? I guess it's just because I have a little bit more faith in the Bears entering a second year of John Fox's system. I think that Cutler, based on the press he gets and fan opinion, I think is actually a little underrated. I still don't see them really challenging in the NFC North. If Alshon Jeffrey can stay healthy, Cutler and the Bears, I think, can probably push 500. I don't think that's going to happen. I think one or both, Cutler or Jeffrey, will be injured for part of the year. I see 6 or 7 wins for them in 2016. I think they have better coaching than the Lions, and I think they have a slightly better defense than the Lions. So that's why I give Chicago an edge over the Lions. So what's going to happen this year at the top of the NFC North? Packers and Vikings, I think they're both going to be competitive. I think they'll be strong. Will they both be teams in the NFC to watch out for, come the end of January? That's tough to say. I never want to count the Packers out when they do so well in free agency, usually not doing anything or filling holes on the cheap, building through the draft. I think their one free agency acquisition in Jared Cook was brilliant. They needed a veteran tight end presence, and he gives them that. He's a very good pass catcher. I think he could really excel in that offense. Defensively, they brought in Kenny Clark in the draft. Just a typical Ted Thompson pick, going defensive line early. Also, Jason Spriggs was another great selection by them, offensive lineman in the second round. They always need offensive line help. They seem to find guys late in the draft, or as bargain guys in free agency, but they rotate through them every few years. And the line's always average, above average, never great. They're still trying to figure that out, in terms of opening up the running game and always protecting Aaron Rodgers. Speaking of Rodgers, a little bit of drama surrounding him with what's going on with his brother and The Bachelor and whatnot. Seems like Aaron Rodgers is a bit of I don't want to call him black sheep of the family, but a little bit of an outcast. I don't know if he got cocky or the money got to him or what, but not a lot of great stuff going on there with him. Will it affect him in the football? Obviously, this has probably been going on for a while behind the scenes. You're just hearing about it now. I'd be more concerned about Aaron Rodgers' age as he's getting up there. He's had some injury history or issues over the last year, and you'll never know when they're going to hit a wall. I mean, just look what happened to Peyton Manning last season. So I'm talking about the Packers a lot. I'm going to keep them in second. This was a tough one. I consider them moving them back to division champs and winning the NFC North. I think I'm going to stick with the Packers in second, like I plotted them at last season. And I just think, while I like the addition of Jared Cook, I don't know that they did too much else. It's hard to pinpoint if the draft picks are going to make much of a difference this year. I did like their draft, but again, how often do you see many players contributing the first year, as rookies in professional football? Especially at some of the positions that Green Bay drafted, in the trenches. They paid dividends, not flashy, though, and sometimes they're not quite ready when the season rolls around. So if Kenny Clark starts and performs well, same thing for Jason Spriggs if he's protecting Aaron Rodgers, maybe they've hit a home run. But will it give them an extra win or two? Tough to say. They were 10-6 last year, finished second in the NFC North. I think that's right about where I'll plot them this year, too. I think Green Bay is a 10... If things bounce the right way, maybe 11-win team. If Rodgers gets hurt, you're going to have some issues. A lot will be made about Eddie Lacy because last year he was supposed to be one of the best players, especially in the fantasy realm, and that just didn't come that just didn't happen. I know from owning him in one of the leagues that I'm in. So they have issues at running back, and it seems to be that way for Aaron Rodgers' entire time there. Now, obviously, they've won a Super Bowl, so some things managed to work out. But, the defense, they remind me a lot of the Colts from Peyton Manning's heyday in the late 2000s, where they seem to be a sieve at time, but they come up with big plays when needed. Unfortunately, they haven't come up with enough big plays, and they've really gotten run all over. They've gotten thrown all over. They can't seem to find consistency, which is a shame because I think they have a pretty decent secondary, but their line and linebackers over the last 4 or 5 seasons just haven't produced. They just haven't been there. Clay Matthews has gone from underrated to overrated in just a few seasons. We've seen a couple of their draft picks bust. Nick Perry comes to mind, but when you have the quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, you can't count him out. As long as he stays healthy, I think Green Bay is at least a 10-win team, and probably good for at least second in the NFC North. Which leads us to the first place in the NFC North and the defending division champs, Minnesota Vikings. I have them getting there again this season. I think they're a strong team that's building for the future. I don't think they're quite there yet, but I think, a 10-11 win season, maybe get the tiebreak over the Packers, is a very distinct possibility. I'm high on Teddy Bridgewater. I was when he was in the draft, and he just looked incredible last year. Hopefully in his third season now, he'll take a big step forward and start to really push Aaron Rodgers in terms of, who's the best quarterback in the North. I know that sounds crazy, but I'm talking season to season here, not career. And Teddy Bridgewater is one of those young guys to definitely keep an eye on. They added some offensive linemen to help protect him, and Andre Smith and Alex Boone. Not too many other free agency additions of note. Maybe Michael Griffin, the safety from Tennessee. Draft-wise, they added a playmaking wide receiver for Bridgewater to throw to in Laquan Treadwell, and also added one of my favorite players, a cornerback out of Clemson, Mackenzie Alexander. He was, I believe, a redshirt sophomore, so he left pretty early, but he at times was quite possibly the best defender in all of college football, and playing at Clemson, a team that's been very strong these last few years and played in the national title game this past season. Alexander's definitely a guy that in the few seasons could be one incredible cornerback for the Vikings and in pro football. So I think the Vikings offense, I think, is more balanced than the Packers. I give the Vikings an edge there, while Aaron Rodgers is clearly still the better quarterback. When you're talking about deep threats or balance, I give the edge to Minnesota. And then you go on the defense. While neither defense, I think, is outstanding, I still give a slight edge to the Vikings. I think they have a strong and developing secondary. Defensive line kind of overshadows or hides some of the deficiencies at linebacker that the Vikings suffer from. But, where it counts head-to-head, I think the Vikings are a better team than the Packers. So unless Aaron Rodgers has some incredible, phenomenal year and Adrian Peterson has age and health issues catch up to him, I really think the Vikings are the team to beat in the NFC North for the second straight year. So I nailed this one last year. I kind of went on a limb picking the Vikings, and I won big. Now this year my big out of the limb one pick was the Raiders, which Uncle Rich called me out on. But I don't think picking the Vikings to win the division is really that big a surprise in 2016 after they went 11-5 and have a lot of young pieces. They really didn't lose much in Mike Wallace and a safety that has done little in the NFL to this point. So, they have great special teams too. Blair Walsh is a great kicker, and they've got returning speed at Cordero Patterson if he can get his head on straight and start to produce and be more consistent. But I just think Minnesota is a strong team. Are they worthy of a Super Bowl nod? Be a favorite in the NFC? I don't know if I'd go that far. It could be another year or so, but Teddy Bridgewater, I think, is the real deal, and I think Minnesota has a good one there. So recapping the NFC North, according to me, at the bottom, Detroit Lions, 5-11. Third place, Chicago Bears. I'll give them one more. I'll say 7-9. Green Bay Packers in second at 10-6, and Minnesota Vikings in first, as I'll say, at 11-5. I think them and the Packers could tie, and it could come down to a tiebreaker. But that's how I see the NFC North. So over in the AFC, the younger conference, but still possibly and probably the better conference, at least in my eyes. You're talking Ravens, Bengals, Browns, Steelers. Starting at the bottom, it has to be the Browns. They were 3-13 last year. They just seem to be a dumpster fire every year. I don't think this year is any different. Until they prove us wrong, you kind of have to go in that direction. They are trying to resurrect the career of Robert Griffin, and all signs point to him probably being named the starter. They got out of the Johnny Manziel drama and cast him off, but they also lost a ton. I mean, maybe this is a good thing too, but wide receivers Travis Benjamin and Brian Hartline. Benjamin was quite possibly their best player last season, and he's gone now. They also lost offensive lineman Mitchell Schwartz and Alex Mack, both starters. And on defense, Randy Starks, Carlos Dansby, Tayshaun Gibson, Dante Whitner. Some pretty big names. Now, were they all playing up to the level they had, 3 or 5 years ago? No, but there's obviously a huge roster overturn there. They had a big draft, one that was pretty decent. Wide receiver Corey Coleman, their first pick, has been lighting up camp, has been easily the best player on the field. And they also got defensive lineman Emmanuel Ogbah and Penn Stater Carl Nassib. They brought in project at quarterback USC's Cody Kessler and many more. They had a huge draft, but a lot of those picks really strong. Hopefully they contributed for them. I hope they take Cleveland to the next level. They went 3-13 last year. I just don't know if they're going to be able to improve much over that. They're just a mess. And they have to prove it on the field. They have to show up. I just don't know that they're going to, unless Kessler shoots out of nowhere and becomes an incredible starter, or Robert Griffin can turn the clock back to 2012. What do they have? There's nothing really to strike fear in anyone. Yeah, okay, Josh Gordon may be back, but who really cares if you don't have someone to get him the ball, or you don't have a defense to stop the other team? Not much is going to happen. So, I mean, I like Hugh Jackson. I want him to succeed. He was given a raw deal in Oakland, but he doesn't have a lot of opportunities to succeed in Cleveland. Will he? I don't know. But I don't see it in the cards. They were 3-13 last year. Honestly, I think Cleveland could be the worst team in the league, and I probably will say they duplicate that 3-13 mark in 2016. Now it gets interesting. The Ravens, down year last year, 5-11. Their quarterback, Joe Flacco, coming off a significant injury. Is he going to be fully healthy and ready to go? All signs point to yes, but honestly, despite that Super Bowl win a few years back, I'm not a Flacco fan. If you've listened to this show at all over the last 5.5 years, you know that. Neither really is Justin. I just don't think he's been that great. I mean, he had the incredible playoff run, and I'll give you that. I'll give him that. He played well in the Super Bowl, but he just doesn't impress me. He's just not a guy that I think is as great as a lot of people think he is. He's obviously better than what else they have, but is he starting to come to the end of his line? We talked about Matt Ryan too a few episodes ago. I think Flacco could be in the same boat. Now, they added a couple guys around him, veterans in Wallace and Watson, to help offensively. They also brought in secondary defenders, Gerard Powers and Eric Weddle. Weddle's a big one there. That's the typical Ozzie Newsome move, to bring in a great defender like that, someone that's going to be a leader and step up. I think it's a great pickup. Also drafting Ronnie Stanley in the first round for some protection for the recovering Flacco. Always great. And I'm sure that there were a couple of gems in the draft that we are not talking about now, but we'll be talking about later. They didn't lose too much. Eugene Monroe retired. And they did lose another starting offensive lineman, Kaliki Asamili. But defensively, not too many huge losses. It's a quarterback-driven league. I know a lot of ESPN talking heads like to say that, if you have the quarterback, you have it all. I'm not sold on the quarterback, so I'm not sold on this team. However, do I think they're as bad as 5-11? Absolutely not. I think they, the ball didn't bounce their way a couple times last year, and then Flacco's injury, despite me not liking him, he's obviously, better than the backups, or he wouldn't be starting. I think they're probably a 500 team. I think they improved by 3 wins. Who's that going to happen against? I can't say, but 5-11, I think that's a little bit out there, and I think they're better than that. If the Browns are a 2-3-4 win team, I think the Ravens are a 7-8-9 win team. But I think that's only good enough for third place in the AFC North. I think they're going to be just behind the Cincinnati Bengals, who last year went 12-4 and won the AFC North. But I think they're going to drop back a little bit, a little bit down to earth. I think 12-4 is a little bit overachievement for them, and we saw them kind of fall apart in the playoffs against the rival Steelers. So that one hurts. I'm sure they're going to be out for blood and revenge and all that stuff, quite possibly literally, knowing some of their players. But I think when it comes down to it, the talent, I think Cincinnati overachieves. I think there's a team that we're going to talk about shortly that's incredibly stacked and poised for a great season in 2016. So the Bengals 12-4 in 2015. This season, I see them going probably 10-6, maybe 11-5. Andy Dalton had himself a great season. They still have AJ Green. They have a couple running backs that, while they don't strike fear in anyone, obviously can produce if they can keep their head on straight. Defensively, we'll see what happens. They added Dansby, who I just mentioned, the Browns let go. He's been in the league a long time. He adds a nice present for the Bengals on defense. They lost two receivers, though, Marvin Jones and Mohamed Sanu. They did bring in Brandon LaFell, who was in Carolina and then New England for a few seasons, so a bit of an offset there. They did lose other defenders, though, in two secondary guys, Leon Hall and Reggie Nelson, and also linebacker A.J. Hawk. So a little bit of some shuffling there, some new guys. Don't think it's a huge deal. I just don't think the Bengals can perform at the same level in 2016 as they did last season. I think they're a very strong team. I think they're going to push for the division title. I just don't think they're going to get there. Obviously, the coaching has been strong there. It'll be interesting to see if they drop back, like I expect them to 10 wins, if people will start calling for a change there. It's tough to say. But the defensive line in Cincinnati is one place that they definitely are strong. Were strong in the past, but have fallen off a little bit here now. I think sometimes now a couple of the linebackers departed, like A.J. Hawk, but I think Ray Mauloga was a little bit of overrated, and we've seen what Vontaze Burfict can do when he's healthy and when he's not being an idiot. Will that rear its ugly head again this season like it did last year? Who knows? But the Bengals like to accumulate secondary parts. They drafted William Jackson in the first round. They also have Drake Kirkpatrick and Derquise Denard over the last few drafts. They just let Leon Hall go, who is a first-round corner. So they have the guys, the pieces, the bodies, at least on paper, to shut down some of these better passing teams. Something's just telling me that they're not going to be able to get it done when they need to this year, and I think it's going to happen earlier in the regular season than in the playoffs, if they make the playoffs. They're obviously, at least I think, are going to challenge for a wild card spot. No guarantees there, but I think they're second place in the AFC North this season, coming in at, I'll say 10-6, so 2 wins less than last year. So that leaves the Pittsburgh Steelers as the team coming out on top. I think last year, I believe I heard that neither Le'Veon Bell, Ben Roethlisberger, or Antonio Brown, I don't know if it was ever played a game together all season or if it was like back-to-back games. I can't remember. I can't remember correctly, and I could be way off on that. I may have misheard, so don't quote me on that. But I just think if Bell doesn't get suspended or suspended for that long, I just think the Steelers have too much talent to not make progress over last season. Hey, and maybe this is me speaking out of both sides of my mouth or being hypocritical because Roethlisberger's getting up there. I said that about Aaron Rodgers. I've mentioned some of the team's deficiencies offensive line, and the Steelers have struggled with that in the past. It never seems like Pouncey can stay healthy. They seem to have a rotation at tackle. They lost Kelvin Beachum in the offseason, not to mention a bunch on defense. They did bring in some tight ends with Heath Miller's retirement. They brought in Ladarius Green, and underutilized and underrated player from the Chargers. They did add Ryan Harris, I believe former Broncos offensive tackle, and they drafted a couple secondary guys in Artie Burns and Sean Davis, who should compete to start in a weak Steelers secondary, which that's really been their Achilles heel, and I feel like they just refuse to recognize it. Hopefully some of their younger guys will step up. The offensive line has gotten better, especially with David DeCastro being healthy over the last few seasons. If Pouncey and DeCastro can stay healthy, they have enough, I think, to open holes for Bell, protect Roethlisberger, and I think that offense can just be absolutely incredible. Antonio Brown, arguably the best wide receiver in the league last year, poised to be the same this year as long as he can stay healthy and avoid Vontaze Burfict. If Roethlisberger plays like he has in the past, he's one of the best in the AFC. I think, it's crazy to talk about this steel curtain being weak defensively, but that's where I think they have issues. Like I said, secondary has always been a sore spot. Their defensive line has not lived up to expectations the last few years, and the linebackers have really regressed. Look what happened. They cut bait on Lamar Woodley, and he's done nothing since. But it's just crazy to see how the team has had issues finding those linebackers. They need to extend Lawrence Timmons if they choose, but I don't know if they should. James Harrison was one of their better players last year, and he's approaching 40. He is still back. They have some young guys along the defensive line, but no one I think that has really stepped up. Cameron Hayward and Stephon Tuitt are great 3-4 defensive ends. They have some issues at nose tackle, finding someone to be that everyday go-to player. Maybe rookie Hargraves will be that guy. They let McClendon go. McCullers was a draft pick a few years ago. Someone will need to step up in the middle. Back to the linebackers, a couple recent busts in Jarvis Jones and Bud Dupree. It's a little bit early on Dupree still, but one of them has to start to produce, or the Steelers are going to be out a draft pick and a lot of talent. It's just crazy to talk about the Steelers not having enough on defense and for their offense just to be overwhelmed with talent, but that's what it is. They say that they're going to go for 2 a lot more this year, and while, statistically and some football philosophies say that's the better way to go than to rely on extra points, which used to be a gimme but aren't so much now, the Steelers do struggle in the kicking game, both punting and field goals, as well as kickoffs. They have some great returners, but because of health reasons, you don't want to use them in a return game, though they still use Antonio Brown. That might change this year. So let's see if Chris Boswell can duplicate his success as a place kicker. The Steelers struggled so much at the beginning of the season trying to find a consistent guy until they landed on him. If he can duplicate his success from the middle and end of 2015, then maybe the special teams will be better rated and come out on top and help them win some games. The Steelers looked really, really strong for a lot of the time last season. If they are healthy throughout, always a big if. I really think the Steelers are one of the class teams in the AFC for 2016, and I think they're going to go 11-5, maybe even 12-4, and win that division, take it back from the Cincinnati Bengals. So to recap, the AFC North, last place and quite possibly the worst team in the NFL to me, Cleveland Browns, probably 3-13 again. Next, I'd go Baltimore Ravens. I think they're better. I think they're an 7-8-9 win team, but I'm just not sold on Joe Flacco or the most of the roster there of being anything more than average. Next, I have the Bengals dropping from first to second, and I think they drop about 2 wins, go from 12-4 to 10-6 in 2016. And then on top in the AFC North in 2016 is the Pittsburgh Steelers at 11-5 or 12-4. And they're going to be a team putting up numbers. If you have a fantasy draft coming up, Roethlisberger, Brown, Bell, if he's not going to be suspended, are easy 3 picks right there. Some of the best at each of their respective positions. So, like I had said at the top of the show, J-Raff not able to make it, and we won't be on with the Joe Mays and J-Raff show for about a month. Actually, I think the next time we're on is Sunday, September 4th, we will be doing the AFC East and also our wild card playoff Super Bowl picks. So a lot of interesting stuff coming up over the next month. Justin and I will be working on the Bulldog Hour. We'll be having our fantasy draft. So there's a lot going on. Joe Mays and J-Raff Show will be back with episode 213 on Sunday, September 4th. There's always a great amount of... there's a great time to contact us over the next month via email, joemaysandjraff@gmail.com. For all kinds of information, you can go to jmnjrradio.com. You can hear or watch all of our shows there. You can contact us. There's even a way to leave a voicemail, so do that. And I think that's pretty much it. I think the last thing I wanted to say was I just wanted to dedicate this episode of the show to my grandmother, Ethel Mays, who passed away this past Tuesday. We had a wonderful memorial service Friday and the burial on Saturday with my large family. It was wonderful seeing everyone and celebrating her life. And she was almost 96, so she did live a long and great life. But while we were cleaning up some of her stuff, we stumbled upon the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show card that I have right here. She had in her apartment, and had it sitting there by her TV. So I just wanted to dedicate this show in her memory and let her know that we love her and we miss her. And thanks for being so supportive over the years. So I think that's everything. So this wraps up episode 212 of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. Hopefully Justin and I will be back in a month, episode 213, to talk and conclude our 2016 NFL preview.
Thanks for listening to the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. Tune in every Sunday for the latest sports discussions from Joe and Justin. Each episode is available live on Ustream or Mixler and can be downloaded or streamed on iTunes and SoundCloud. You can interact with Joe and Justin on Facebook and Twitter, and stay up to date with the guys at joemaysandjraff.com. The Joe Mays and J-Raff Show is part of the JMNJR Radio Network. For more info, visit jmnjrradio.com.